This is a special image. It depicts a seam in the fabric of NBA history where two eras met. Magic Johnson broke the mold to become the greatest NBA point guard of the 80s. Penny Hardaway showed eerily similar promise in the 90s. For a couple nights, Magic and the so-called Next Magic shared a court. This is the story of two dazzling exceptions and what happened when their careers overlapped. In the late 80s, a Memphis high school basketball player began to garner national attention. Anthony Hardaway arrived on the scene with a great nickname, Penny, but the peers and scouts Hardaway impressed gave him another label, the Next Magic. That was a big comparison. It meant a lot of things. Earvin Johnson defied basketball orthodoxy. At 6'9" and well over 200 pounds, Johnson had the powerful body of a forward, but he carried it with enough grace and dexterity to play point guard, a role usually reserved for the littlest players. That's what made him Magic. From school to even his earliest days in the pros, Magic Johnson ranked among his team's leaders in points, rebounds, and assists. His production pushed the NBA to start keeping track of triple-doubles, which they hadn't even done for Oscar Robertson. But Earvin Johnson didn't buy his nickname with production alone. The magic was in his unmatched flair, the palpable joy with which he played, and in his undeniable stardom. This is Magic in the 1977 Michigan High School Championship. He's one of the biggest players on the floor, but here he is flicking a touch pass to a teammate who's just become open. Here he is dribbling the length of the court and perfectly timing an entry to a backdoor cutter. A couple years later, Johnson led the Michigan State Spartans to the 1979 NCAA Championship. Here he is flashing some signature magic in the Elite Eight. He freezes the Notre Dame defender with his eyes, then whips a no-look assist to the trailer. Later that year, Magic arrived as a pro on a Lakers team already featuring multiple stars, including a legendary center in Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Playing point guard on these Lakers was a daunting assignment for a 20-year-old. And yet, here's Magic in his first NBA game, anticipating a pass, slipping traffic with a full-speed wraparound dribble, then leaping to feint one way and pass the other. Magic could take over as finisher and post presence when called upon. Just look how the rookie performed without Kareem to clinch his first championship. But for much of his career, Johnson wasn't the first scoring option. His chief role was ball handler and distributor, quarterback of the offense. Not a point forward, but a true full-time one. Intrigued by this anomaly, observers went fishing for the future version. It became kinda cliche to anoint any tallish basketball prospect with point guardish skills the next Magic. Danny Manning, Lloyd Daniels, Sean Elliott, George McLeod, all closer to 7 feet than 6, all exhibiting some guard-like tendencies and statistical profiles. But Magic himself kept raising the bar for what it would take to succeed him. By the time Penny Hardaway entered college in 1990, Johnson held 3 NBA Finals MVP awards, 3 league MVPs, and a fistful of championship rings. And he was a star off the court, with more than enough personality to fill the LA spotlight. Heroic and victorious, lovable and marketable. So the next Magic signified way more than be tall, pass good. Yet people kept saying it about Hardaway and meant it. It began, of course, with the size-to-skill ratio. Hardaway honed his ball handling, passing, and agility as a 5'8" middle schooler. Then he grew almost a foot in high school. Those who watched a 6'7" player lead his team in points, rebounds, and assists at multiple levels couldn't help but make the usual comparison. Those words came from fellow players. Hardaway just had so many passes. The words came from a scout who'd studied Earvin Johnson as a teen prospect. After 10 years of searching, he'd finally glimpsed the next Magic. Observers saw Magic not just in Penny's game, but his personality. As for the kid himself, a high school-aged Hardaway downplayed the comparisons. But he did love to pass since it kept all his teammates happy, and that was absolutely inspired by the NBA's biggest great point guard. Hardaway didn't achieve the same collegiate glory as Johnson, but he did look very promising and very cool playing at Memphis State. Watch a guy big enough to finish this alley-oop with ease and deft enough to throw this lob of his own from near half court. Watch him drag a defender one way, knowing full well he's going to pass the other way. Watch this unbelievable wraparound backhanded feed that should have been illegal to ruin with a blocked shot. Watching from the booth at one of Penny's games, Magic sounded impressed.
Not only is he quick, but he's fast too.
There's your man.
Yeah, there's Hardaway getting ready. And I tell you, you're talking about somebody who can do it all. Pass it, shoot it, rebound, that's him.
Johnson was basically describing himself there, and he intended to. Magic and Penny shared the court when college players trained alongside Olympians in 1992. Magic described the meeting as like looking in a mirror and facing myself. By his junior season, Penny spent less time denying the comparison and joked about bringing even more to the table. And there were distinctions. Penny's coach noted that his tall point guard wasn't as strong as Magic, but developing in the era of the three-pointer projected to be a superior shooter. In any case, draft night would present an important juncture. Most high picks are called upon to resuscitate sorry, empty franchises. But just like Magic Johnson landing in LA, Penny got lucky. Around the time Hardaway declared for the 1993 draft, he did some acting in the film Blue Chips alongside Shaquille O'Neal. O'Neal had been the Orlando Magic's first pick in the 1992 draft. Even as a rookie, Shaq showed the promise to be the NBA's next great center, the Kareem of a new generation. But Orlando finished just short of the playoffs, tipping into the 1993 draft lottery. In an odds-defying miracle, they won it again. So not long after Shaq got to know Penny's personality and game on the film set, his employer held the first draft pick. Chris Webber sat atop most draft boards, but Shaq knew who he wanted. Orlando executive Pat Williams watched Penny work out, saw what others saw, and cleverly traded down to make it happen. Like his forerunner, Penny entered the league on a good team with a tremendous center. The letters stitched across his chest read like Kismet. If Shaq was the modern-day Kareem, Penny wanted to be his Magic. In a perfect world, the rookie Hardaway could have proved his worthiness against the man himself, but the real Magic was gone. In November 1991, 32-year-old Magic Johnson stunned the world by announcing he had tested positive for HIV and would retire from pro basketball immediately. The ensuing years were a whirlwind. Johnson became a new, prominent face representing and answerable to whole communities. Communities who had for over a decade been suffering. Magic's fame and fortune afforded him the best treatment while also inviting public scrutiny, like speculation about his relationships and sexuality. Johnson endeavored to dispel stigma around HIV and its transmission, playing in the 1992 NBA All-Star Game and the Olympics that summer. He began an NBA comeback in the 1992 preseason, but cut it short amid public disapproval from players like Karl Malone. By the time Hardaway debuted in the fall of 1993, Johnson was 34 and still outside the league, devoting his time to charity and activism. When Johnson returned to the NBA later that season, it was as Lakers coach. So this NBA newcomer was the preeminent tall point guard, but he wasn't a point guard to start. Orlando coach Brian Hill already had veteran Scott Skiles in that position. Hardaway played off the ball while he learned the ropes, which took some time. Penny got booed the first time he ever took the court in Orlando for a variety of reasons. But there were flashes, more and more. After Hardaway's first big assist game in December, Coach Hill felt compelled to defend Skiles' hold on the point guard spot. But Skiles couldn't keep up. He was entering his 30s, managing back pain, and going through a divorce. Hardaway gradually took over and flourished. He won Rookie of the Month in January and earned MVP at the '94 Rookie All-Star event. Hardaway started to show he could be not just a star, but an on-ball star like Magic Johnson before him. Unlike Johnson, a rookie Hardaway didn't lead his team to playoff success. Reggie Miller's Pacers swept the Magic in Orlando's first ever playoff series. In Hardaway's second season, the comparisons came back for real. Penny put up splendid, point guardly numbers, including a 35-point triple-double against the Bucks. He produced dazzling highlights, like this demonstration of strength and precision that had announcers invoking that familiar name.
Unbelievable. That was a Magic Johnson play there.
He joined Shaq as an all-star starter, and his fame blossomed with exposure like a Sports Illustrated cover that invented a new word to describe Penny's position, and a sneaker commercial in which he literally jumped a shark. The Magic really had their own magic, and Penny had fun playing that role, though he did feel its weight every time Magic himself echoed the hype. But Penny and company handled the pressure. The '95 Magic rolled to the best record in the Eastern Conference. They won their first playoff series. They spoiled Michael Jordan's return from retirement. They got revenge on Reggie and the Pacers to reach the franchise's first NBA Finals. Penny played sensationally throughout the '95 playoffs, but Orlando couldn't stop Hakeem Olajuwon and couldn't finish games against the defending champion Rockets, who won it all in a sweep. Onward and upward, though. Injuries sidelined Shaq for a significant chunk of '95-'96, and the big guy's impending free agency grabbed headlines. Hardaway, meanwhile, developed as a point guard and assumed more scoring duties. Orlando remained elite, the only Eastern team within arm's reach of the rebooted Bulls. Off the court, Hardaway's mellow personality didn't command attention like Magic Johnson once had, but Nike found its own way to market the young all-star. Yes, that is a puppet. His name is Lil Penny. He was voiced by Chris Rock, and please just trust me that if you were a child in 1996, Lil Penny was very cool. So Hardaway wasn't a champion yet, but he was a big superstar point guard maturing beside a monumental center. It wasn't outlandish to call Hardaway the Magic Johnson of the 90s. And then the real Magic came back. After his brief stint as coach, Johnson had bought a Lakers ownership stake and expanded his interests outside basketball, both as an activist and businessman. Johnson had also stayed in shape by playing pickup and exhibition ball and lifting weights to bulk up his frame. In January 1996, Magic began practicing with the Lakers. On January 30th, over 4 years since his shocking retirement, Johnson returned. The Lakers hardly resembled the team he'd left, and Magic hardly resembled the player who'd left them. He was 36 years old and around 30 pounds heavier than his former playing weight. More like a forward now, especially with electrifying youngster Nick Van Exel playing point. But he was Magic. He finished just short of a triple-double in his first game back, and from there helped LA to a February win streak and a strong start to March. And on March 17, 1996, the Lakers got a visit from the road-weary, injury-riddled Orlando Magic. Facing a legend sounded like just the wake-up Hardaway and company needed. Penny reiterated how comparisons between himself and Magic presented both encouragement and pressure. He expressed admiration, but said he was more interested in defining his own game than patterning off Johnson. And on that topic, one of the main stories coming from a happy LA locker room was that of Magic's young teammates still getting accustomed to his slick passes. He still had that. Magic checked in a slower, bulkier player than the one who inspired Penny's joy for passing, but he promptly whipped a one-handed sidearm bounce pass right through Penny's fingertips to find Cedric Ceballos slipping to the rim. A few minutes later, Magic threw a similar pass on the diagonal. Wizardry notwithstanding, Magic played much more like a traditional big man. He posted up not just smaller players like Dennis Scott, but bigger players like Horace Grant. Johnson's calf seized up in the second quarter, perhaps a victim of the game's fast pace. He returned still determined to create, even out of the post, like this fancy, frivolous dish to Eldon Campbell. Hardaway, too, had a night in which his best passing came from the post. Look how his height allows him to glance over help defense and swing the ball to the weak side for a Dennis Scott 3. A relatively quiet outing for both players ended in narrow Orlando victory. The papers noted Magic's strained calf only further diminished his lost mobility. The rematch came just 9 days later in Orlando. Penny sounded more excited this time, eager to perform at home in the presence of a legend. He said he'd been a little too pumped up last time and needed to calm down. In the intervening days, Magic had become a starter, replacing not Van Exel at point guard, but the young, high-scoring small forward, Cedric Ceballos. That was the big storyline at the time, since a pissed off Ceballos had reacted by taking an unannounced water ski vacation in Arizona. But another narrative would prove more important in the long run. Magic Johnson was recruiting. The man who earlier in the season had pulled Hardaway aside to share some advice about playing point guard alongside a superstar big man, now publicly courted that very same superstar big man. Asked about Shaq's looming free agency, Johnson said he knows we want him. It could be like old times with him and Kareem. That was a thrilling prospect for a kid who grew up loving the Showtime Lakers and wore Kareem's number in high school and college. All this chatter came in a moment when the Magic were squashing rumors of conflict between Shaq and Penny. Intrigue. But first, basketball. Well, first, this warm and foreboding exchange between Magic and the apple of his eye. Hardaway played better this time, capitalizing on his size for buckets like this one, in which he fought off some help from Magic to finish inside. But Penny faded in the second half, and a huge Lakers run included Johnson leading this textbook 3-on-2 break right at Penny. Said Penny, magic was magic. The blowout defeat was remarkably Orlando's first home loss of the season. Of the bygone streak, Shaq said, "All good things must come to an end." Indeed they do. The Lakers' season ended in a first-round playoff defeat against the Rockets. Johnson's last month or two had been a mixed bag, and he wasn't pleased with how little point guarding he'd done during the postseason. A couple weeks later, he announced his retirement, on his own terms this time, and for good. Later that month, Orlando failed to match the prior season's success, falling to MJ and the Bulls in a conference final sweep. A deflated Hardaway didn't want to be mentioned alongside the retiring great. Without a championship, there was no comparison, and Penny would never get that close again. Amid further rumors of a rift, Shaq left for the Lakers in the summer of '96. When he was young, Shaq had envisioned himself on the end of a Magic Johnson pass. Now he'd forsaken the so-called next Magic, only to just miss playing with the original Magic. Without the next Kareem by his side, the next Magic had to adjust. Unlike his forerunner, Hardaway now had to lead without a real co-star. Maybe point guard wasn't the most effective role for a top scorer. Johnson himself had already reappraised Hardaway as more of a shooting guard than a point guard like himself. Maybe Penny's template should be Michael, not Magic, a scorer, not an unusually tall distributor. As Orlando changed coaches, twice in 1997 alone, Hardaway shifted away from the ball. Shots up, assists down. He scored plenty in a first-round playoff series against the Heat, but Orlando fell in the decisive Game 5. And then the injuries began. Knees, ankles, one surgery after another. Penny was never himself after '97, let alone the next Magic or the next Michael. Hardaway had frustrating stints in Phoenix and New York, retired, then made his own return as a 36-year-old for the Heat. Penny played a few games alongside his old co-star, then got waived, out of the league for good and not on his own terms. Shaq, of course, had won championships galore in the company of two other great guards. Penny once sadly remarked that Kobe Bryant got what he deserved. But those outstanding guards were something other than the next Magic. Being Magic wasn't just playing like a point guard. It was playing point guard, joyfully, creatively, and successfully. That requires brilliance, and it requires the right conditions and the right teammates. Penny Hardaway checked an impressive number of those boxes before free agency and injury derailed his rise. Penny really did look like the next Magic, and thanks to a surprise return, he got to show it against Magic himself. For a moment in history, two generational exceptions overlapped. Thanks for watching a video from Secret Base. If you liked it, you might enjoy diving down one of these rabbit holes, and I recommend you subscribe to find out when we have new videos posting. Love you.